Ambassador Sarah Chen walked into the Grand Assembly Hall with her usual warm smile, nodding politely to the various alien delegates as she made her way to the human seat. The massive dome-shaped chamber buzzed with dozens of different languages and communication methods. Crystalline beings chimed melodically to each other, while gaseous entities pulsed with colored lights. The familiar sight brought comfort to Sarah, who had spent the last 5 years representing humanity in the Galactic Council. "Good morning, Ambassador Chen," gurgled Vorthak, the amphibious representative from the Kepler system. His translated voice carried the artificial politeness that most species had learned to use with humans. "Morning, Vorthak. How are the spawning pools this cycle?" Sarah asked, remembering details about his homeworld that many other delegates forgot to track. The question clearly pleased the Keplerian, whose throat sac, inflated with what Sarah had learned, was their version of a smile. This was typical of human behavior that both puzzled and charmed the other species. Humans remembered personal details, asked about families, and seemed genuinely interested in the welfare of beings completely unlike themselves. Council leader Zephrix called the session to order with a harmonic tone that resonated through every being present. The ethereal, energy-based life form had led the council for over 3 centuries, making decisions that affected trillions of lives across hundreds of star systems. "Today we address the matter of the Rigel mining dispute," Zephrix announced, their voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The Vegan Consortium claims exclusive rights to the asteroid belt, while the Tau Ceti Alliance argues for shared access based on prior surveys." Sarah listened intently as both sides presented their arguments. The Vegans, tall humanoids with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke in sharp, clipped tones about their investment and risk. The Tau Cetians, insectoid beings with compound eyes and chittering mandibles, clicked rapidly about historical precedent and fair resource distribution. The debate grew heated. Vegan delegate Crix stood to his full 8-foot height, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. "We invested 17 years and 43 billion credits in this operation. The insects want to steal the profits of our labor." The Tau Cetian Queen Speaker's mandibles clacked angrily. "Theft implies ownership. The void belongs to all. Your arrogance blinds you to justice." Other delegates began taking sides, the chamber filling with a cacophony of alien voices. The Crystalline Federation chimed their support for the Vegans, while the gaseous collective pulsed in agreement with the Tau Cetians. Old alliances and ancient grudges surfaced as the argument escalated. Sarah raised her hand, the simple human gesture somehow cutting through the chaos. The chamber gradually quieted, all attention turning to the small human woman in her modest gray suit. "If I may," Sarah began, her voice calm and measured, "perhaps we could explore a compromise that serves everyone's interests." Murmurs of curiosity rippled through the assembly. Humans were known for these kinds of interventions, always seeking middle ground where others saw only conflict. "The Vegan Consortium has indeed invested significantly in surveying and preparing extraction operations," Sarah continued, standing slowly. "Their risk and effort deserve recognition and fair return. However, the Tau Ceti Alliance raises valid points about resource accessibility and the precedent of exclusive claims in international void space." She walked to the center of the chamber, her movement fluid and confident. "What if we established a partnership model? The Vegans maintain operational control and receive a guaranteed 70% of net profits for the first 10 years. Compensating their investment and risk. The Tau Cetians provide additional survey teams and extraction expertise, receiving 20% of profits plus preferential access to similar opportunities in vegan space. The remaining 10% goes to the Council's Development Fund for Emerging Civilizations." The chamber fell silent as delegates considered the proposal. It was classic human diplomacy. Find a solution where everyone gained something rather than a zero-sum, winner-takes-all outcome. Delegate Crix's blue skin darkened as he processed the numbers. The humans suggest we give away 30% of our rightful profits. Queen Speaker Vix's compound eyes fixed on Sarah. You ask us to accept junior partnership in our own ancestral territory. But Sarah's smile never wavered. I ask you both to gain more than you would from a prolonged legal battle that could last decades and cost millions in fees, while the resources sit untapped. I suggest you both profit from cooperation rather than lose from conflict. Other delegates began nodding approvingly. The Altarian representative, a being of pure energy, pulsed with agreement. The human speaks wisdom. Cooperation yields greater returns than competition. After 2 hours of detailed negotiation, both sides agreed to Sarah's framework with minor modifications. As delegates filed out, many stopped to thank her for the breakthrough. The Vegans and Taucedians, while not entirely happy, recognized they had gained more than they expected. Another successful mediation, Ambassador Chen, Zephrix observed, their energy form hovering near Sarah as the chamber emptied. Your species has a remarkable gift for finding solutions others cannot see. Sarah gathered her notes, still smiling. We just try to understand what everyone really needs instead of focusing on what they're demanding. Indeed. The Council is fortunate to have humanity's perspective. Your diplomatic approach has prevented 17 conflicts in just the past year. As Sarah left the chamber, she felt the familiar satisfaction of a job well done. Humanity had found its niche in the galactic community not through superior technology or military might, but through their unique ability to bridge differences and build consensus. They were the peacemakers, the mediators, the species others turned to when situations seemed impossible. 3 days later, Sarah was reviewing reports in her office when her assistant, Marcus, burst through the door without knocking. His face was pale, eyes wide with shock. Sarah, you need to see this, now. He activated the wall display, showing a news feed from the Outer Rim territories. The image showed a human colony world, New Taipei, but something was terribly wrong. The cities were burning. The green agricultural zones were blackened wastelands. In orbit, the twisted remains of human ships drifted among the debris of what had been a thriving space station. What happened? Sarah whispered, sinking into her chair. Marcus's voice was tight. The Cortharian Empire. They declared New Taipei was in violation of some ancient territorial claim, attacked without warning, without any attempt at negotiation, wiped out everything. Sarah's blood ran cold. The Cortharians were one of the older council species, known for their rigid adherence to law and order. They had always been distant, but respectful toward humanity. How many? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know. 2,400,000 civilians, plus another 600,000 in the orbital stations and defensive fleet. Marcus paused, swallowing hard. There were no survivors, Sarah. They didn't just attack, they glassed the entire world. The display showed orbital footage of the planet's surface. What had been a verdant world teeming with human life was now a radioactive wasteland, its atmosphere burning away into space. New Taipei had been one of humanity's most successful colony worlds, a showcase of human agricultural innovation and peaceful development. Sarah stared at the images, her mind struggling to process the scale of destruction. These weren't soldiers or combatants. They were farmers, teachers, artists, children, families who had traveled dozens of light years to build a better life, only to be murdered without warning or mercy. What's the Council's response? She asked, her voice strangely flat. Marcus consulted his tablet. Emergency session called for tomorrow. Initial statements express concern and call for investigation into the territorial dispute. Territorial dispute. Sarah repeated the word slowly, as if tasting something bitter. Is that what they're calling genocide now? For the first time in her diplomatic career, Sarah Chen felt something she had never experienced before. a cold, crystalline hatred that settled in her chest like a shard of ice. She had spent 5 years building bridges, finding compromises, seeking peaceful solutions to every problem. She had believed in the fundamental goodness of intelligent beings, their capacity for reason and cooperation. But as she watched footage of human bodies being pulled from the ruins of New Taipei's schools and hospitals, Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her. The warm diplomat smile that had become her trademark slowly faded from her face, replaced by an expression the galaxy had never seen on a human representative. "Marcus, get me a priority channel to Earth. Tell them I need to speak with Admiral Chen. Tell him it's family business." Marcus looked puzzled. "Admiral Chen? Sarah, you never mentioned having family in the military." Sarah's eyes never left the display, where rescue teams were still pulling bodies from the wreckage. "My brother. He runs the Deep Space Fleet. I've spent 5 years keeping him from finding out exactly how hostile this galaxy really is." As Marcus hurried to establish the connection, Sarah continued watching the feeds from New Taipei. She memorized the faces of the dead children, the burning hospitals, the shattered dreams of millions of humans who had believed the galaxy was a place where reason and diplomacy could triumph over brutality. The other council species had made a critical error in their calculations. They had observed 5 years of human diplomacy and peaceful mediation, and concluded that humans were inherently passive, inherently weak. They had mistaken humanity's preference for peaceful solutions as inability to consider alternatives. Sarah's reflection in the dark window showed a face that would have been unrecognizable to her council colleagues. Gone was the warm, understanding expression that had mediated dozens of conflicts. In its place was something cold and patient and utterly implacable. For the first time since joining the council, Ambassador Sarah Chen looked exactly like what she was, a predator who had simply been choosing not to hunt. The communication panel chimed with an incoming priority message from Earth. Admiral David Chen's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression already grim from the preliminary reports. "Hello, little sister," he said quietly. "I hear your peace talks aren't going as well as you hoped." Sarah studied her brother's face, seeing the controlled rage that mirrored her own. David had spent his career preparing for this day, building fleets and training crews for a war he hoped would never come. Now that hope was burning on a dead world 40 light-years away. "David," she said, her voice carrying none of its usual diplomatic warmth, "I think it's time you met my colleagues." The emergency council session convened 18 hours after the New Taipei footage reached galactic networks. Ambassador Sarah Chen entered the Grand Assembly Hall, but the delegates who had grown accustomed to her warm greetings found themselves facing a stranger. She walked with the same measured pace, wore the same diplomatic attire, but something fundamental had changed in her bearing. Gone was the gentle smile that had become synonymous with human diplomacy. Her expression was neutral, professional, completely unreadable. Several delegates noticed the change immediately, though none yet understood its significance. "The session recognizes Ambassador Chen of the Human Federation," announced Council Leader Zephrix, their energy form pulsing with what might have been uncertainty. Sarah stood, her movements economical and precise. "Thank you, Council Leader. The Human Federation appreciates the swift convening of this emergency session to address the unprovoked military action against our colony world." Cortharian War Prime. Thek rose from his position across the chamber. The massive reptilian humanoid stood nearly 10 feet tall, his scaled hide bearing the ritual scarification of his rank. "The Cortharian Empire objects to the human's characterization. New Taipei was established in violation of ancient territorial claims clearly documented in the Galactic Registry." Sarah's head turned toward Thek with mechanical precision. For 5 seconds, she simply studied him without speaking. The silence stretched uncomfortably as every being in the chamber waited for her response. "War Prime Thek," she said finally, her voice carrying the same pleasant tone she had always used, though something in it made several delegates shift uneasily. "Could you direct the Council to the specific registry entry that establishes Cortharian claims to the new Taipei system?" Thek's yellow eyes narrowed. "The claim is established under Section 47 Delta of the Ancient Territories Code, dating back 4,000 years. Sarah nodded slowly. "I see. And this claim was filed when, exactly?" "The claim has existed since the founding of the registry. But when was it filed in relation to human colonization of New Taipei?" Thek's forked tongue flicked out briefly, a sign of agitation among his species. "The timing is irrelevant. Ancient claims supersede all subsequent settlements." Sarah's expression didn't change, but several empathic species in the chamber reported sensing something that made their survival instincts activate. "I understand your position, War Prime. For clarification, you're stating that a territorial claim filed 3 days ago, referencing 4,000-year-old documents that were never previously enforced, justifies the immediate execution of 2.4 million civilian men, women, and children without trial, negotiation, or warning." The chamber erupted in surprised chittering and gaseous fluctuations. Vorthak's throat sac deflated completely as he processed Sarah's words. Even Council Leader Zephrix's energy pattern flickered with what might have been shock. 3 days ago." Queen Speaker Vix's mandibles clacked rapidly. "The Cortharian claim was filed 3 days ago." War Prime Thek's massive frame tensed. "The timing of official filing does not diminish the validity of ancient territorial rights." Sarah consulted her datapad with the same calm professionalism she had always displayed. "According to Galactic Registry records, the Cortharian Empire filed territorial claim KC-7739 Delta on the new Taipei system at 1437 Galactic Standard Time 3 days ago. Human colonization of New Taipei began 47 years ago, following standard survey and settlement protocols. The human colony has maintained active registry status, paid all required fees, and submitted regular population and development reports for 47 years. She looked up from her pad, making direct eye contact with Thek. "Would you say that 47 years of unopposed, legally documented human presence might constitute a reasonable basis for assuming the system was uncontested?" Thek's claws extended and retracted, a threat display that had intimidated dozens of species. Ignorance of superior claims does not establish rights. "I see." Sarah set down her data pad and stepped forward slightly. "So to ensure I understand the Cortharian position completely, you believe that any species can at any moment file a territorial claim based on ancient documents, and that this filing justifies the immediate extermination of any existing civilian population without warning, trial, or opportunity for relocation. The Cortharian Empire does not recognize invalid settlements." Sarah nodded once, as if filing away important information. "Thank you for clarifying your Empire's position, War Prime. I want to make certain humanity understands exactly how the Cortharian government approaches territorial disputes." Something in her tone made every translator in the chamber struggle briefly, as if the words carried meanings their systems couldn't quite parse. The Altarian energy being dimmed noticeably, while several of the smaller species unconsciously moved further from the chamber's center. Council Leader Zephrix intervened, their harmonic voice carrying notes of diplomatic urgency. "The Council recognizes the tragedy of New Taipei and calls for a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding this regrettable incident. We must find a path forward that respects both ancient territorial rights and the legitimate interests of established settlements." Sarah turned to face Zephrix, and for a moment several delegates swore they saw something predatory in her movement. "Council Leader, the Human Federation appreciates the Council's concern. However, We must respectfully decline the offer of investigation." The chamber fell silent. In 5 years of human participation in council affairs, no human representative had ever declined council mediation. "Ambassador," Zephrix's form pulsed with confused harmonics. "Surely you understand that council investigation is the appropriate response to territorial disputes?" Sarah's smile returned, but it was nothing like the warm expression delegates remembered. This smile was technically perfect, diplomatically appropriate, and absolutely terrifying to every survival instinct in the chamber. "Council leader, the Human Federation has concluded that the destruction of New Taipei was not a territorial dispute. It was an act of genocide committed against human civilians. As such, it falls outside the Council's jurisdiction over territorial matters." War Prime Thek's scales rattled with aggressive display. "The human speaks incorrectly. Enforcement of territorial claims cannot constitute genocide." Sarah's head turned toward Thek, with the mechanical precision of a weapons system acquiring a target. "War Prime, I want to ensure I understand your definition of enforcement. Your forces attacked civilian agricultural facilities, medical centers, schools, and refugee evacuation ships. They targeted and destroyed hospitals treating wounded civilians. They glassed the entire planetary surface to prevent any possible survivors. Would you characterize these actions as standard territorial enforcement?" "Resistance was eliminated. This is normal military practice." "I see. And the children in the schools were resisting?" Thek's claws extended fully. "Children grow into adults. Adults form resistance." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps, chittering, and harmonic distortions. Even species known for their ruthless efficiency looked disturbed by Thek's casual admission of targeting children. Sarah nodded slowly, as if checking off items on an invisible list. "Thank you, War Prime. That clarification helps humanity understand Cortharian military doctrine regarding civilian populations." She turned back to address the full council. "The Human Federation formally notifies this body that we consider the New Taipei action an act of unprovoked genocide. As such, humanity withdraws from council jurisdiction on this matter and will handle the situation according to human law and custom." Council leader Zephrix's energy pattern fluctuated rapidly. "Ambassador Chen, surely you cannot mean to handle this outside council authority. The council has maintained galactic peace for over 1,000 years through diplomatic resolution." Sarah's expression remained perfectly pleasant. "Council leader, I deeply respect the council's track record in resolving territorial disputes and trade disagreements. However, the systematic murder of human civilians falls outside the scope of diplomatic resolution. Humanity will address this matter directly with the Cortharian Empire." "You threaten war?" War Prime Thek stepped forward, his massive frame intended to intimidate. Sarah looked up at the towering reptilian warrior without the slightest sign of fear. "War Prime, I make no threats. I simply inform you that humanity considers the Cortharian Empire responsible for the murder of 2.4 million human citizens, including 600,000 children. We will respond according to human law and custom. Your weak species poses no threat to the Cortharian Empire. We have conquered 47 worlds." Sarah's smile widened slightly. "War Prime, I believe you may have misunderstood humanity's nature during our time in the Council. We chose diplomacy not from weakness, but from preference. We sought peaceful solutions not because we lacked alternatives, but because we believed rational beings could coexist through cooperation." She paused, studying Thek's scarred features with the attention a scientist might give to an interesting specimen. "The Cortharian Empire has demonstrated that rational coexistence is not possible. Therefore, humanity will no longer limit itself to diplomatic options. You cannot threaten the Empire in this chamber." Sarah's expression didn't change. "War Prime, I have made no threats. I have simply informed you that humanity's diplomatic phase regarding the Cortharian Empire has concluded. What follows will be handled through different departments of the human government. Several delegates were furiously accessing their databases, trying to understand what different departments might mean. Most had never bothered to research human governmental structure beyond their diplomatic corps. Vorthak's throat sac trembled as he spoke. Ambassador Chen, surely humanity does not possess significant military capability. Your species has never demonstrated aggression or warfare in council interactions. Sarah turned toward the Keplerian delegate, and her expression softened slightly. Vorthak, humanity chose to present our diplomatic face to the council because we believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. That choice should not be mistaken for inability to choose differently. She addressed the full assembly. For 5 years, humanity has sought to be good galactic citizens. We mediated disputes, sought compromise, built bridges between species. We did this because we genuinely believed that intelligent species could coexist through reason and mutual respect. Her voice remained calm and professional, but something in it made the chamber's environmental systems adjust for increased stress pheromones from multiple species. The Cortharian Empire has demonstrated that this belief was naive. By targeting human civilians, including children, for extermination, they have shown that some species view peaceful cooperation as weakness to be exploited. Sarah gathered her materials with deliberate precision. Humanity thanks the Council for 5 years of educational interaction. We have learned much about galactic civilization. Unfortunately, we have also learned that some lessons can only be taught through methods other than diplomacy. As she prepared to leave, Council Leader Zephrix made one final attempt. Ambassador, surely we can find a peaceful resolution. The Council's mediation has prevented countless wars. Sarah paused at the chamber's exit, looking back at the assembled delegates who had grown accustomed to her finding solutions to impossible problems. Council Leader, for 5 years I have helped prevent wars by finding peaceful alternatives to conflict. Today I learned that some conflicts cannot be resolved peacefully. She smiled one final time, the expression carrying none of its former warmth. The Council should consider itself fortunate that humanity spent 5 years learning which species can be reasoned with and which cannot. That information will be very useful in the coming days. As Ambassador Sarah Chen walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall for the final time, her footsteps echoed with the sound of an ending. Behind her, delegates sat in stunned silence, beginning to understand that they had just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. The moment a species transitioned from diplomacy to something else entirely. War Prime. Thek stood motionless, his predator instincts finally registering what his intellect had missed. The small human female who had mediated countless disputes with patient wisdom had just delivered the most terrifying declaration of intent he had ever heard, and she had done it without raising her voice or making a single direct threat. In the growing silence of the chamber, several species began accessing their databases to research human military history, government structure, and technological capabilities. What they found in the following hours would keep most of them awake for days to come. Admiral David Chen stood on the bridge of the HSV Retribution, watching the tactical display as his fleet emerged from hyperspace. 247 human vessels materialized in perfect formation around the Cortharian homeworld of Korth Prime. The planet below pulsed with the lights of a civilization that had stood unchallenged for millennia. "Sir," reported Commander Martinez from the communications station, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different Cortharian military commanders. They want to negotiate." David's weathered face remained impassive. "Any word from War Prime Thek?" "Negative, sir. Intelligence suggests he's in the primary command bunker, broadcasting propaganda about Cortharian superiority and inevitable victory." The Admiral nodded slowly. "Mr. Martinez, open a channel to Korth Prime. All frequencies, all networks." I want every Cortharian on that planet to hear this. Channel open, sir. David stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a species that had finally stopped pretending to be harmless. People of Korth Prime, I am Admiral David Chen of the Human Federation Deep Space Fleet. 72 hours ago, your government ordered the unprovoked attack and complete destruction of the human colony world New Taipei. 2.4 million human civilians were murdered, including 600,000 children. He paused, letting the numbers sink into whatever passed for Kortharian conscience. Your War Prime Thek has publicly stated that these murders were justified territorial enforcement and that human children were legitimate targets because they would grow into adults who might resist Kortharian rule. The tactical display showed Kortharian defense platforms powering up, their weapon systems coming online. David ignored them completely. For 5 years, humanity has participated in galactic civilization as diplomats and mediators. We chose this role not from weakness, but because we believed intelligent species could coexist through reason. Your leaders interpreted our diplomatic nature as evidence that humans were inherently passive prey animals. Several Kortharian battleships began moving toward the human fleet, their massive forms bristling with weapon emplacements. The human vessels didn't shift formation or power weapons. They simply waited. This was a critical miscalculation. Humanity is not and has never been a prey species. We are persistence predators who evolved to hunt by wearing down larger, stronger opponents through relentless pursuit and superior endurance. We developed diplomacy because we learned that cooperation yields better results than constant warfare, but cooperation requires 2 willing parties. David's expression hardened as he watched the Kortharian fleet approach. Your empire has demonstrated that it views cooperation as weakness and civilian murder as acceptable policy. Therefore, humanity will demonstrate why our ancestors climbed to the top of Earth's food chain before we ever developed civilization. Sir, Commander Martinez reported quietly. The Kortharian fleet is within weapons range. They're charging primary batteries. David nodded. Execute Protocol 7. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The human fleet didn't fire weapons, launch missiles, or deploy energy screens. Instead, every human vessel simply vanished. The Kortharian commanders found themselves staring at empty space where moments before, the largest battle fleet in their history had been arrayed against them. Sensors showed nothing. Energy readings detected no residual signatures. 247 warships had simply ceased to exist. For 17 minutes, the Kortharians searched frantically for any sign of the human fleet. Their most advanced sensors swept through every frequency, examined every cubic meter of space, analyzed every possible hiding place. They found nothing. Then the orbital defense platforms began exploding. One by one, Korth Prime's primary defensive installations erupted in brilliant flashes of contained destruction. Each explosion was surgically precise, eliminating the station's ability to threaten orbital traffic while leaving the crews enough time to reach escape pods. Within 40 minutes, every defensive installation around Korth Prime had been neutralized. The Kortharian fleet commanders watched in growing horror as their impregnable homeworld defense grid was systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't engage. Sir, Martinez reported from his station, we're receiving panic transmissions from Korth Prime Military Command. They're offering complete surrender and requesting immediate negotiation. David studied the tactical display where Kortharian ships moved in increasingly desperate search patterns. Negative. Open the channel again. His voice once more filled every communication device on Korth Prime. Kortharian Military Command, your offer of surrender is noted but insufficient. War Prime Thek publicly stated that killing human children was legitimate military policy. The Human Federation requires a more comprehensive response. On the planet's surface, massive industrial complexes began experiencing catastrophic failures. Military shipyards erupted in precisely controlled explosions that destroyed construction facilities while allowing worker evacuation. Weapons manufacturing plants found their molecular foundries developing mysterious malfunctions that rendered them permanently inoperable. Communications arrays simply stopped functioning, their quantum entanglement networks severed with surgical precision. The human fleet remained invisible. "How?" whispered Cortharian Fleet Commander Vex as he watched his civilization's military infrastructure systematically evaporate. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer's scales had turned pale with fear. "Sir, our best analysis suggests they're using some form of dimensional phasing technology. They exist in normal space but shifted slightly out of our detection range." "That's impossible. Dimensional manipulation requires energy output equivalent to a stellar core." "Yes, sir." "That's what makes it impossible." Commander Vex stared at the reports flowing across his screens. Every major military installation on Korth Prime was being methodically destroyed. The precision was terrifying. Weapons factories obliterated, while food production facilities remained untouched. Military headquarters reduced to rubble, while hospitals and schools suffered no damage whatever. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the humans are transmitting again." Admiral Chen's voice filled the Kortharian command center with calm, professional authority. "Kortharian military leadership, your planet's ability to project military force has been eliminated. Your orbital defenses, weapons manufacturing, shipbuilding facilities, and command infrastructure have been neutralized. Civilian casualties total 0. This demonstrates the difference between human military doctrine and Kortharian policy." The transmission paused as several more military installations vanished in controlled explosions visible from orbit. "However, elimination of your military capability addresses only the immediate threat to human civilians. War Prime Thek's public statement that human children were legitimate targets requires a more personal response." Commander Vex felt his blood chill as he processed the implications. He's not going to negotiate. He's going to keep escalating until... The thought remained unfinished, but every Kortharian in the command center understood. They had studied human diplomatic records, analyzed their mediation techniques, examined their peaceful resolution methods. But none of them had researched what humans did when diplomacy failed. Admiral Chen continued, his voice carrying the patience of a species that had evolved to pursue wounded prey across continents. "War Prime Thek will be delivered to human custody within 6 hours, or we will begin Phase 2 of our response. I strongly advise you not to discover what Phase 2 entails." The transmission ended, leaving Korth Prime's leadership in stunned silence. Fleet Commander Vex turned to his staff, seeing his own fear reflected in their expressions. "Find Thek," he ordered. "Find him now." While Kortharian forces desperately searched their bunkers and strongholds, the rest of the galaxy watched in fascination and growing horror. News of humanity's response had spread through every major civilization, and diplomatic channels buzzed with urgent communications. Council leader Zephrix convened an emergency session, their energy form fluctuating with barely controlled panic. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything in their diplomatic files. Their fleet has somehow achieved total invisibility while maintaining full combat effectiveness. They're systematically dismantling one of the galaxy's major military powers." Vorthak's throat sac remained completely deflated. "The implications are staggering. If humans possess this level of technology, why did they spend 5 years mediating our petty disputes?" Queen Speaker Vix's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Perhaps we should ask a different question. If they could have dominated the Council at any time, why did they choose diplomacy instead?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The Altarian representative, A species of pure energy, beings known for their analytical capabilities, pulsed with what might have been admiration. They chose diplomacy because they genuinely preferred it. They sought cooperation because they believed in its superiority to domination. The humans spent 5 years teaching us that strength used wisely creates better outcomes than strength used brutally. The assembled delegates absorbed this revelation in uncomfortable silence. And now? Zephrix asked quietly. Now they're teaching the Kortharians what happens when you mistake preference for inability. Back on Korth Prime, War Prime Thek had been dragged from his command bunker by his own officers. The massive reptilian leader struggled against the restraints, his scarred hide reflecting the fires of his burning military installations. Cowards! The Empire does not surrender to inferior species! Fleet Commander Vex backhanded Thek with enough force to crack one of his facial scales. Your inferior species has destroyed our entire military capability without losing a single ship. They eliminated our orbital defenses without firing a shot we could detect. They're systematically dismantling our civilization while keeping civilian casualties at 0. Thek's yellow eyes blazed with uncomprehending rage. Impossible! We are the apex predators of this galaxy. No, Vex replied quietly, watching another weapons facility vanish in precisely controlled destruction. We're not. We never were. We just never encountered the species that actually earned that title. As Kortharian shuttles prepared to transport War Prime Thek to the waiting human fleet, Admiral Chen received a priority transmission from Earth. His sister Sarah appeared on the communications screen, her diplomatic expression replaced by something coldly satisfied. Hello, David. I see you've been busy. Hello, little sister. I thought you might want to watch this part. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical display that showed Korth Prime's defenses in ruins. The Council is in full panic mode. Half the species are demanding emergency meetings, the other half are quietly updating their files on human capabilities. Any regrets about leaving diplomacy behind? Sarah considered the question, while watching Kortharian vessels approach under white flags. David? For 5 years I believed that every intelligent species could be reasoned with, that every conflict had a peaceful solution. I genuinely thought we could build a galaxy where cooperation triumphed over conquest. She paused, her expression hardening. Then I saw the footage from New Taipei. I saw what they did to our children, our families, our dreams of peaceful coexistence. And I realized that some species can only be taught through the language they understand best. On the screen, Kortharian shuttles docked with human vessels, delivering War Prime Thek into custody. The reptilian leader would spend the rest of his life in a human prison, learning exactly how persistence predators dealt with those who threatened their young. The galaxy needed to understand, Sarah continued, that humanity's 5 years of diplomacy was a gift, not a limitation. We chose to be peacemakers because we believed in peace's superiority. But when peace becomes impossible, we're still the same species that climbed to the top of Earth's food chain. Admiral Chen nodded, watching as the last Kortharian military installation surrendered. And now they know. Yes, Sarah agreed, her diplomat's smile returning for the first time since New Taipei's destruction. But this smile was different. Warmer toward friends, infinitely more terrifying toward enemies. Now they know that when humans stop grinning, the real predator awakens. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy settled into a new equilibrium. The Council resumed its diplomatic functions, but with a profound new respect for the small bipedal species that had spent 5 years teaching them the value of cooperation. Territorial disputes found resolution faster than ever before, as species discovered unprecedented motivation to seek peaceful solutions. The Kortharian Empire fragmented into smaller, more cooperative states that actively sought human mediation for their reconstruction. War Prime Thek's public trial became a galactic reminder that some lines should never be crossed, and humanity returned to their role as mediators and peacemakers, their warm smiles and patient diplomacy more effective than ever before. Because now, the galaxy understood the true lesson of human nature. They chose peace not from weakness, but from strength so overwhelming that they preferred not to use it. The predator had awakened, demonstrated its capabilities, and chosen to sleep again. But now everyone knew it was there, watching, waiting, ready to emerge whenever human children were threatened by those who mistook diplomacy for defenselessness. In the depths of space, the human fleet maintained its patient vigil, invisible guardians of a peace they had bought with the promise of swift and terrible consequences for those who would break it. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their military might, but their wisdom in choosing when to use it. And in the council chambers where Sarah Chen had once mediated impossible disputes with warm understanding, delegates now approached their negotiations with a new awareness. Cooperation was not just preferable to conflict. For some species, it was the only option that allowed them to continue existing at all.